We ready?
I'm ready, baby.
Let's go. Welcome to the Money, Mindset and Marketing podcast. My name's Alan Miles. I'm the host of this wonderful podcast. Today I am joined by none other than Payton Welch. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself because I think I probably will butcher the plethora of things that he takes care of. My first memory of Payton was joining Client Kit a few years ago on a sales call, and he was the master of silence. And it was something that I remember very, very well. So Payton, please feel free to introduce yourself. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the video feed. If you're listening to us, obviously enjoy what we have in store for you for the next 30 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, first off. Yeah, so my name is Payton Welch, and my official title is Chief Revenue Officer for the Evans and Welch portfolio. You know, Taylor and Chris have got a million companies now at this time. Basically, it's just trying to keep up with them at this point. But our main companies would be Traffic and Funnels, Wealth Cap, Intelligent Advertiser, and Sales Mentor, which is what people usually probably know me from, since all of the ads have my face on it. So that's that would be my official title, would be CRO though. Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. That's why I got you to do that, not me.
Yes.
So talk to us a little bit, for those of you that don't know you, those of you that don't know the Traffic and Funnels and everything that goes with it, Sales Mentor, those kind of things. Like, talk to me a little bit about where you started from. Like, what was your background? How did you get into this?
Yeah, so I was actually not, I'm not a very talented or naturally gifted, I would say, salesperson. It's not like you hear those stories about, like, man, when I was a kid, I was, you know, selling lemonade in the neighborhood, or I was selling and they're like, oh, naturally really good at sales. And that really wasn't me. If there's anything I was really naturally good at, it would be insecurity. Being insecure is what I'm really naturally good at. And that kept me out of sales actually for a really long time, because while I was extroverted and I liked being around people, and I grew up in churches, which I feel very lucky to have grown up in church, because you learn a lot about how to communicate with people inside of a church and inside of a community. But that was literally my only experience with sales, so to speak, was literally just attending churches and meeting friends. But I got into sales because I was really bothered by the way that at least here in the States, and I'm sure it's probably very similar elsewhere too, because the majority of I would say 50% of our clients for Sales Mentor, for salespeople, are actually outside of the US. But for me, what I noticed is that the process of a young person building a career and being able to receive a monetary reward equal to the value that they bring to the table was really difficult for me to find. And I was job hopping, and I was a terrible student. So I was a college dropout, and I stumbled into a sales position reluctantly, because I had grown up with hearing about how sales is risky. And sales is like, man, the highs might be great, but you have to be careful, because the lows are very bad, and sometimes you make no money. And so I was actually, I think unintentionally, I was raised with this fear around sales because of how risky it was. And so I accidentally stumbled into a sales position because I was tired of being poor. And I felt like everywhere that I had worked before, like I said earlier, my monetary value was being determined by someone else, no matter what and I felt like I couldn't convince my bosses that, like, no, I can be trusted with more. I can, you know, if I can just get a raise, you know, all that stuff. And I actually bought a book a long time ago. This is what got me into it. It was Selling Yourself by Napoleon Hill.
Okay.
And I don't remember a ton from that book. That's what's funny, but I remember getting it. And I remember deciding, like, man, I'm going to learn how to sell myself. And then I got into, you know, how to win friends and influence people, and a lot of John Maxwell books, and just learning about it. And that's how I got into sales. And then I became a cold caller. And it was one of the worst and best jobs I've ever had. Worse because cold calling can be difficult, but man, I cut my teeth on just talking to hundreds and hundreds of people and butchering sales calls. And then I found the online space, and the rest is history. And have closed millions and millions of dollars for a couple of different companies now. And now I run multiple sales teams. So
yeah, cold calling is absolutely brutal. I did that for a large portion of my career, and it is one of those things that it either makes you or breaks you.
Yes,
it doesn't it,
absolutely.
especially if you come from an environment where you're not maybe a natural born seller, you're not the guy. And everyone can think of those types of salespeople, can't you? Like the Brad Lee type or the Grant Cardone type, who can sell anything, isn't afraid to be, and was basically born to be a salesperson.
Yeah.
And then, like you're saying yourself, insecurity was something that played a big part. Cold calling in those environments, I think you really find your true inner kind of metal and that inner steel, don't you, to be able to go, okay, this is how I'm going to get through it. And you're going to burn a few calls, but you are going to build that resilience to know that actually, if you keep pushing, you can get through, and you can actually make the sale at the end of it. Okay, so for anyone, and I think a lot of people who will listen to the podcast, they're not going to be naturally salespeople. They're going to be people who have sales as part of their business. I'm a big believer in energy. So that whole coaching energy is very clean. And then you have sales energy, which can be quite dark. What would be 3 bits of advice, or 1 bit of advice that you would give to people who are trying to improve at sales, but it isn't their natural gift? They know they need to do sales, but it isn't their natural gift. What would be something that you would really pinpoint is a needle mover?
Man, such a good question. And I feel like we're going to run out of time, because that's such a good, I feel like we could just talk about that forever.
Yeah.
I think you bring up energy, which is a really good point. And we're very heavy into teaching salespeople about energy. We have a saying, energy equals money, because if you take a salesperson, let's say salesperson A has a plethora of experience. They're very seasoned. They've been selling for a while, but they're sort of burnt out and they've been tainted by the sales world. And so their energy is lower. They don't have that same zest and zeal that they used to have when they were fresh and green and just excited to be a part of something that they could grow in. And then you compare that to salesperson B, who does not have sales experience, but they have that zeal, they have that energy. They're just excited to talk with people and help people and solve problems. Salesperson B will beat salesperson A every single time. And I've seen it with my own personal teams. One of my best salespeople right now on my team, he had never sold anything before. He had no sales experience, brand new, but he just had this sense of drive and determination to take care of himself and his family. And he was pumped at the opportunity. And he immediately became my best salesperson. Had never closed anything before. And he's doing things on the phone that he doesn't quite understand yet. Because we'll review a call and I'll be like, that's really good. That's a great frame. That's a great reframe that you just did to help that person understand their situation. Where did you read that somewhere? And he was like, I didn't know I was doing that. He's just, and it's that energy. And so I would say, for people that are wanting to get better at sales, but they feel like, oh, I'm not naturally gifted, welcome to the club. Mm-hmm. And I think that if you can make it less about you and more about helping people, there's automatically a natural bit of a flow that kind of comes into your life. Not to sound too woo, but I think there's a little bit of extra flow that comes into how you operate on the phone, the amount of fun you have. I think that if you can find a way to gamify sales, let's say they're a business owner and they're wanting to get better at sales, but they just can't quite make it click. If you can find a way to gamify that and set up reward systems or anything that can make it fun, you will find that you start closing significantly more for some strange reason. That's my advice.
Okay. I like it a lot. I think for me, definitely when I look at that transition from going from, I used to do recruitment sales and then I moved into to an online space.
Oh, recruitment is brutal too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough environment, definitely. And it's that thing of, for me, that transition to a higher ticket sale process, it was about finding the value. It was about being able to not only know you're showing up to do what's right for the person, because especially if you're not a natural salesperson, I'm definitely not. I'm a very introverted person. I like the insecurities part that you said at the beginning. Like naturally, that I think resonates with a lot of people who would be listening to this. And it's that thing of understanding that it's okay if you're not a really gritty salesperson. It doesn't mean you can't be great at sales. You just have to find that purpose. You have to find that deeper meaning. So talk to me then a little bit, because I'm always intrigued by this, people's morning routine. I think how you start your day and how you end your day to a degree, but how you start your day tells a lot about the person, I think. So what is your morning routine?
So I am unbelievably religious in my routines. And I feel like I got that from Taylor. You know Taylor.
I do.
And Taylor is probably one of the most routine oriented people ever, but I've taken it a step further, and he keeps trying to get me to change my routines a little bit. And I think I really got into this during the quarantine days of 2020, because I found myself, this might be more than what you're looking for, so just cut me off if you want me to shut up. But
no, go.
I remember right when quarantine hit was right when I started like tapping onto mastery when it comes to sales and just getting really, really good consistently. But the quarantines kind of exposed an area of my life where I was letting my talent carry me. And so when, gyms shut down, it was harder to go get groceries and all of that stuff. I started getting really unhealthy, and I ended up gaining, 40, 50 pounds during quarantine. And I was having to, this might be TMI, but man, I remember sitting in my home office one day, just staring at the wall, with so much Adderall just pumping through my veins because I was so physically unhealthy that I was having to supplement my energy. And I remember being like, dude, what, like, this is not safe. This is not sustainable. I was experiencing some just a ton of physical health benefits besides just hating being fat. And so I remember I called up one of my buddies and I was like, dude, can you help me get some of my, he's a personal trainer. I was like, I don't want to get jacked. I don't need to get ripped. I just need to be able to have energy and just get off drugs, to be able to sustain my energy. And that's when I started really locking in bedtime every single time at night, waking up every single time, work out at the exact same time. I basically eat the same thing every single week. I track my sleep with the Oura Ring. But what my morning routines are right now is I get up at 4:40, and then I always do something physical. I love CrossFit. It's great for someone with ADD like me. And I know there's a lot of people that don't like CrossFit, so don't hate me if you hear this. But I'd always do something physical, and the reason why is because you know this feeling too, when you've been you're on a sales call and it's getting close to the edge, and you feel like you could push it over, but then there's resistance, and you just like start sweating. Yeah. And you have a physical reaction, like literal physical reaction, fight or flight, that will course through someone's veins when they have that moment. That's a level of physical stress and anxiety that literally it happens to everyone. And I started realizing that I don't want my first dose of stress to be on a sales call. I want to induce that first in the morning, because then it makes everything else easier later in the day. And so I do something physical whether it's I just go run. I think some people would even do great how about you start going on a walk in the morning? Just get some blood pumping, get your heart rate up just a little bit, so that you can, the other things later on in the day that induce stress, you've already countered that to a certain extent. So that's a long win. But so I'll wake up at 4:40, I do something physical every day, and then I have to read at least 10 pages of something every single day. And it's usually mindset focused, just because that's what helps get me inspired and excited. I have to journal after I read. Post-reading journaling is usually my favorite, because it gives me good stuff to journal about, and it gives me good things to kind of digest through paper. And then after reading, I listen to one of my closed sales calls. I've got a folder of some of my favorite closes. Okay. Those moments where we call it being in pocket, where you were a leader, you served this person, you weren't a pushover, and you challenged someone to step out of their comfort zone. And the reason why I listen to one of those every single morning is because it reminds, every time you go to sleep and you wake up, there's a physical, mental, and emotional reset that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever had like a day where you crushed it and then the next day you felt like, oh my God, do I even remember how to sell anymore? Like, I just feel so spacey. That's the reset. And if you listen to one of your one calls in the morning, it almost gives you a mold that you can fit into. It's like, oh, this is how I sound when I serve people at my highest capacity, and I end up making money from it. And it fits you back into that mold, so that for the rest of your day on sales calls or meetings or whatever, you're almost using that as like a stencil. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a really interesting thing. So part of what I do is, so I'm a qualified NLP practitioner. And
okay, yeah.
So it's interesting to listen to your anchors, because obviously, like your morning process, it's hitting all of the different areas. And that listening to the sales call is a really interesting one, because obviously it's hitting it from the auditory perspective and really creating that mold for you to step back into each day. And I think that's the really important thing. The one thing I would say to anybody listening to this, and I remember thinking all the way back to when I first started to immerse myself in mindset, like, take what other people do as their morning routine as a marker of what you could do. I think one of the key things is incremental adjustments rather than monumental change. And you see people get burnt out so quickly when they go from 0 to 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I remember taking a look at it was Taylor's morning process. I mean, like, I'm gonna mirror that. Before that, I'll be completely honest, I had no morning process, and it was a case of, oh my God, how on earth do I do this every day?
Yes.
And it's too big of a jump. It's about making those incremental shifts and listening to your body. And as you've kind of done through that period of time, as you've built that routine around you, it's like a custom process, isn't it? That suits you perfectly. And I think it's a really interesting process. I absolutely, I'm in the club with morning exercise. It's one of the most important things to get your mind clear, to get the blood pumping, to get to break a sweat, to get your heart rate up, and to get you focused. I think that's the important thing for the day, isn't it? Because it gives you that moment to gain clarity. You've woken up, you've moved forward like a little bit into your morning, and all of a sudden, when you start to do a run or you start to get deep into the reps of a workout, that's when your subconscious kicks in, and it allows you to resolve some of those like knots that you've got in your head of, how do I resolve this situation that has been bothering me? It gives you that release and that process to be able to move forward.
Dude, that's so good. That's so good. And one thing to add on that real quick, if you don't mind. I know you'll love this because you're a health nut and you're jacked. But the one of the things that I use to kind of explain this is like the difference between macronutrients and micronutrients. A macronutrient, like a protein, is, it can, a piece of salmon and a piece of chicken or whatever, like you can get those to the same level of macronutrients. But when you get into the micronutrients, it's different. It's a deeper level of what you're actually consuming. And what I found is that doing the right things are the macronutrients. Doing the right things at the right times are going to be your micronutrients. So that's why it's like, someone's like, oh yeah, I work out every day. And it's like, but are you working out at a time that actually sets you up for success? Or someone's like, yeah, I'm listening to my calls, I'm reviewing calls, or I'm reading, I'm studying, but are you reading and studying at a time where it's actually going to help you operate at a very high level? And I think one of the mistakes I did make a long time ago when I was first taking over sales teams was trying to force everyone to match my level of routines. But there's some people that like crush it at night. I've got some sales guys where it's like, it's really interesting looking at their data. They close a lot more deals in the evening than they do in the morning. And it's kind of like when, I don't know if it's chronotypes or whatever, but that's when they start to click. And so definitely I love what you said, have some flexibility around picking and choosing and changing your routines, and test them out. And if something doesn't work, don't do it.
Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? Just because somebody else does it doesn't mean you should do it. And it's about, I think, data. You said a key word there, data. Like when you review the data of the closers, and it's the same with your own body, isn't it? Tracking the data, whether it's weight, whether it's your thoughts, whether it's your feelings, your mood, your energy, tracking those things is what allows you to create the perfect routine for you. Like for me, I love mixing up when I'm doing some learning in the morning. I love mixing up a mixture of motivational stuff with some money stuff, so that I don't go go too far off into the mindset stuff, and I don't go too harsh into the like aggressive sales stuff and collecting money. It's about finding that balance, but it has to match your personality, I think. Okay, so I got an interesting question for you now. So what are your thoughts around failure? Is it something that is a good thing, is a bad thing? And what was your biggest failure that you've ever had in life, and what did you learn from it?
I think failure creates tough people. And I think that there are some things that you just can't learn unless you fail. Now there are failures I want to avoid by learning from other people. I don't want to have to personally experience bankruptcy to learn the lessons from it. So there are things where it's like, I think there's some failures that people don't need to have to experience. I think that they're like, for instance, I don't think you need to go through a divorce necessarily to just to learn the lessons of like, how do you be a great spouse? You know what I mean? But I do think that there is a key learning lesson, and there's these key like traits and characteristics that you can get by failing the right way. And I was reading a book about this guy in one of the oldest ancient texts ever. It's called the Bible. And there's this guy named King David. And you've heard of David and Goliath and stuff. And in this book I was reading about David, it was talking about how to reveal a David, you have to experience a Goliath. And he was talking about how like it's not adversities that define you, but it's the way that you respond to them. And that's what creates a king, so to speak. And so I'd say one of my greatest failures, man, I don't know, I've got so many of them, honestly. And I would say professionally, let me think, my biggest failure. I would say my biggest failure professionally would be holding on to chips on my shoulder for too long. That's where the insecurities would come in right there. Like I said earlier, I wasn't the greatest. I was not naturally good at this. I felt like I wasn't necessarily bet on by a lot of people. And so I used that as a way to get myself to get stuff done and be driven and motivated. But then it's got a very diminishing rate of return having chips on your shoulders. And it cost me a lot in relationships and in just treating people the wrong way. And so I would say my biggest failure, that like, if I could change anything, it would probably be holding on to that. Yeah.
It's interesting. Good stuff. So when we look at failure then from the angle of, I think one of the areas that people seem to struggle with the most, not just in sales, but just in business in general, and to be fair with life, is money. Like you seem to have this area of people wanting to make that leap from a job earning an okay salary, or maybe even a good salary, to being a business owner and becoming rich, quote unquote. And it's that transition of that relationship with money. I think a lot of people, in my opinion, and I know I've definitely fallen foul of this rule in the past, you become the slave to money rather than money being the slave to you.
Yeah.
Do you have, with everything that you have going on, obviously with Wealth Cap and all the other things happening, do you have an ethos around money, or a process and some key principles that you believe and follow? I think that'd be really interesting to hear if you do.
I absolutely do. There's a great book by Steve Siebold called How Rich People Think. And so if you would say that, like, I'm listening to this and I don't have a healthy relationship with money, I would probably start there, honestly. But I think I'm really fortunate to have not been taught any negative, like really weird negative anchor learning lessons around money from my parents. But it wasn't until I got into the world of personal development and I started making money, and then I realized, like, okay, my relationship with money isn't bad, but it's not how a wealthy person thinks. And I love money, man. I love being able to use money to help people. I think that money in the hands of a good, honest person, it's very hard to beat the the amount of change and influence and the great things that they can do in the world if they have funding. And I think I started realizing that there's no impact that exists without being funded in some way. And whether it's directly or indirectly, every kind of impact, if someone says, I want to make a big impact in the world, you're going to have money to do it. There's no other way around it. And it doesn't necessarily need to come from you, but it has to be funded. Like you look at these 501c3s, these big nonprofits, they're funded by someone. You look at the teacher that while they're not making a ton of money, but they want to have an impact on their students' lives, and well, it's still being funded. It's being funded by their salary. Like you wouldn't be able to have that impact without. And so I think people need to definitely correct their relationship with money, because money's a great tool. But one of my biggest philosophies around money is around generosity. And generosity, I truly believe, has a boomerang effect. And again, I feel, I don't know how woo your audience is, so I'm trying to like find the right line of, but I think that there's a generous spirit is very attractive to money. Mm-hmm. And I've got a rule around generosity, and it is that whenever I'm experiencing lack, I always give more. And when it feels the hardest to do, I always try to find more ways to be generous. Mm-hmm. And when it feels the most difficult to give, like that's when you should give the most, because a scarcity mindset is like a deterrent to wealth. But a generous person, like wealth flows to that person like a river, and it just can't be stopped. Mm-hmm. And so I would say to anyone that is like, man, I just don't, I'm struggling with money, or I'm not making enough money, like try giving some away.
Yeah.
And just watch.
You know what? I love that. I love that, because that is one of those things that you see so many people who are always complaining like how expensive things are. And even if they've got a little bit of money, like, I work so hard for my money. That's ridiculously expensive. And money is difficult for them to come by. And they truly believe money is hard. One of the key principles that I live life by, law of attraction. Like, yes. If you want money, we'll give some money, like put it out into the world. And I wholeheartedly agree with that, especially when it's the hardest thing to do. If you've fallen on tough times. And Tony Robbins tells a story. I don't know if you've ever heard it, like when he was down to his last $15 and he was really, really struggling. He was in a restaurant. It was like an all-you-can-eat buffet or something like that. I'll probably butcher his story because it's his story, not mine. But he basically saw a kid walk in with his mum, and they sat down for dinner. And he walked over to the kid, and basically the kid was like, "Well, I can't afford to pay for dinner for my mum." And he basically gave the kid the money and said, "Treat your mum to dinner." And he left with literally zero money. And then, I mean, I'm sure there's some creative license to the story, but he ends up receiving money very quickly afterwards that he was owed by a friend. And I think to some people, and I think to a lot of people, until you experience it, definitely, it just sounds stupid. It just sounds made up. Like, how could it possibly make an impact? If I give some money, how am I going to get some money? I'll be honest, I don't understand the laws of gravity, but I still abide by them. Like, do you know what I mean? It's the same principle. And I think it's that thing of sometimes we have to accept that there are things outside of our control that we maybe don't fully understand, but we have to respect them because there's too much data there to suggest otherwise. Look at all of the people who have made it so successfully, not just financially, but because wealth, I think, comes in lots of different ways, like with love and with friendship, with with being able to give and all those kind of things, as well as the money side of it. There's so many people out there, and it's always about gratitude, giving, like putting stuff out into the world that you want to receive, because the most miserable person they just put misery out into the world. And it's just the way it is. So I think that's interesting that's your kind of sentiment. What would you say if you had to give 3 book recommendations? So you've recommended a few books so far. If you were to give 3 books to somebody, they are wanting to take their personal development to the next level, maybe are considering trying to find a way to break away from the rat race, what would be 3 recommendations that you would give book-wise?
Okay, so and this is just for someone that is it someone that's wanting like to get into the sales world, or do you just mean like just personal development all the way, or both?
A bit of both. Let's do
Okay.
both.
Okay. So the first book that I would recommend, if someone is brand new to the world of personal development and betting on themselves, I would say Choose Yourself by James Altucher is a great one. Great eye opener. 177 Mental Toughness Secrets of the World Class is also fantastic. That's also by Steve Siebold. And for someone that's wanting to get into sales, I would say Pitch Anything by Oren Clough. Okay. Also a great book. But for anyone else, man, I'm looking at my bookshelf. There's so many good options. Anything John Maxwell is obviously going to be incredible. I love John Maxwell so much. The Traveler's Gift by Andy Andrews is also fantastic. All of these, what they do. And by the way, I've got a whole list of my favorite. There's like 11 of them. My top identity building resources for salespeople, and I've got it on a whole list. And there's only 2 of them that are actually designated as sales books, because there's only so much you can learn from sales in a book. First off, but second off, is that sales tactics and strategies I believe are wasted on a weak identity. And you can have 2 people say the exact same thing, and it works for one person and it doesn't work for another person. And then when you listen in, the delivery of what they say is usually determined by the identity that they hold. And so that's why I'm so big on salespeople reading these. They're like, oh yeah, what sales book would you recommend? And I don't give them any sales books. I give them identity books, you know?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, actually. I could talk sales all day long. I think it's such an interesting topic. Sales scripts are probably one of my biggest bugbears. I absolutely hate sales scripts. I think frameworks are fantastic, but scripts are terrible. I will never forget the first script somebody gave me to read. It was an American coach. I'm from the UK. The first line is, "What's up in your world?" Have you ever heard a British person say that? I don't even know what it means. I think it means hello. But it's that thing of somebody actually then called me out on that, and they said, "What do you mean?" And my response was, "I don't know." And it's that thing of, it comes down to identity. Like your sales script, like what you're saying has to align with who you are. Like you have to believe what you're saying. And you can say, like you say, you can say the same thing, but it's delivered slightly differently. And it creates such a change. I actually thought you were going to say Psycho-Cybernetics. I would have almost put money on that book coming up.
So that's such a good book, but it's so deep. And a majority of our sales mentors, sales clients are relatively young. And I find that that's usually a really big bite for someone entering into the world of personal development. And so what I'm actually doing, by the way, I'm just going to put this in the chat for you. That's my list. If you want to offer it to, or put it in the podcast notes or whatever, those are my favorite, Tim Grover, those are my favorite development books. And so I would say Psycho-Cybernetics is on this list, but you'll notice it's down the list a little bit, because I think that it's so good. But if I would have started with Psycho-Cybernetics when I was 21 and I was just getting into reading books and personal development, I don't know how far I would have made it through that book.
Yeah, it is. I suppose it is quite a tough read if you've if you're new to the whole development side of things.
It is.
It is a great book though.
It's so good, dude. It's so good. I think if you have been in it, my suggestion would be, if you've been in the personal development space for a while, like, and you've been working on yourself and you've been reading for a while, and then I would say, man, pick up that book, because it's going to change you. If you're listening to this and you're like 20 years old and you're just wanting to learn how to maybe grow a business one day, or you're wanting to get into sales, I would start with something a little bit easier to digest first,
Yeah, absolutely. So any closing remarks? What would you say to somebody who is trying to make it in the world of sales, or trying to make it in the world of business? They're finding it a tough place to be. What advice would you give them?
I believe that sales is a trademark skill set that will amplify your trajectory no matter what you do. Knowing how to sell will only help you. like for whatever your goals are, whatever your ambitions are. If you want to be a business owner, that's totally cool. That's not my thing. That's why I've never run a business before. I love sales, and I love being a part of teams, and running, like being an entrepreneur just wasn't in my cards really. But regardless, you have to be good at sales to run a business. Otherwise, all you have is a lot of really good, valuable info that you give people, but you aren't able to monetize that to the level that you deserve. So for a business owner, you have to get good at sales. You have to. It's not good enough, just in my opinion, it's not good enough just to bring on a sales team. Like, you need to know a little bit about what you're doing with sales. For someone that would maybe resonate with what I said, they're like, man, I've been feeling the same way. Like, I want big things. I want to accomplish big things. I want to be able to take care of my family. I want to be able to invest, but the idea of starting a business is just like beyond me. That's totally okay. And there's a lot of lucrative careers to be found in the sales world, and it's safer than you think. Who was it? It was Alex and Layla Hormozy, who are amazing, by the way, great people, very successful. I heard him describing why sales is actually the most the most safe career you can actually be in. And the way he broke it down was so brilliant. It was, if you have a business that's doing, let's say, $300K a month, and you as a salesperson account for 40% of their revenue, because that's what you do as a salesperson. You produce revenue for the company, versus a person that is just a W-2, they're a sales support role, whatever. If that company goes through a hard time and they have to make layoffs, which position are they more likely to cut? The person that accounts for their revenue, or the person that does not? And it's like, well, okay, when you put it that way, sales is significantly safer. Yeah. And I feel like if I would have heard that when I was 20, maybe I would have gotten started in sales sooner. And so I just think that if you feel like being a business owner isn't in your cards, one, learn about it first, because you don't know, like, everyone felt that way. Every business owner felt that way before they really got started and started picking up momentum. Yep. But if it's not, get into sales, learn how to sell. It will only serve you. It's so much bigger than just what it can do for you monetarily in the business world, but it's made my relationships better. It is, it just amplifies everything in your life, in my opinion. And so I love sales, man. I think it's the best skill set that you can have. Hopefully everyone can hear that through my voice. I think that it just scares some people. And so it's like, man, it's not as scary as you think. Get into it, learn it, cut your teeth, fail on some sales calls. You'll be okay. Don't give up. And you'll find a joy and a freedom inside of the skill set that I think is very hard to find personally.
Yeah, I agree. I think sales is a fantastic area to help people. And I think it's just one of those areas that people have such a negative view on, of salespeople. And they group them as a type of person, salespeople. But it's like, but hold on a minute. How did you find somebody to marry or be in a relationship with? You sold yourself, and they sold themselves.
Exactly.
There's sales skills and everything. How do you communicate to your 2 or 3-year-old to eat their carrots? You sell them the idea.
That's it.
Like, you convince them. And it's that thing of understanding that we already have some kind of sales skill in us. I liked that explanation Alex Hormozy has, and I agree. I think sales is probably one of the safest jobs if you're willing to do the work. Like, if you're somebody who just wants to hide, pick up a paycheck, and not really have to do anything, and play like bingo all day online at your desk, then maybe not. But if you're willing to put in a bit of work, sales allows you to directly control your income, and you can either become the biggest asset of the business, or that's the only risk, isn't it? If you're not willing to do the work, then, well, you're not going to survive in sales. But that's the only reason why not. And then it's a case of being able to look in the mirror, understand that failing, and make a decision like, how do I move forward from that positively? Because if you go knock enough doors, pick up enough phone calls, have enough Facebook conversations with people, it's inevitable that eventually you're going to find your routine. You're going to find your way forward. So if somebody wants to follow you, where do they find you? We'll put all of the links obviously in the notes, but where can people find you if they're listening to this now, they're sat on their phone or maybe at their laptop? How can they get in contact with yourself and anything that you do?
So I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Payton W. Welch. But also our sales mentor is on YouTube at The Sales Mentor. It's on Instagram as well. And then if you go to the inboundcloser.com, you can see a lot of our info and some of our trainings, like our Inbound Closer Accelerator, which is our entry level course around sales. And so I would check out those places for sure. Check out our YouTube channel. There's just so much good content that we've got. So if you just search for the Sales Mentor, search for Inbound Closer, stuff like that, you'll find us for sure.
Fantastic. I appreciate your time, Payton. And I look forward to hopefully doing this again with you in the future. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. For those of you listening to the podcast, if you want any additional information, we'll be breaking down this podcast and doing a more in-depth training in our Facebook community. If you visit alamiles.com, the link to the community is at the top of the page. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, whether you're watching this on YouTube, listening to this on your favorite podcast subscribing system. Be sure to share this as wide as you can. It's been an honor. Look forward to speaking to you again soon, Payton. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.